Okay, we're live streaming.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CVTA Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We will go ahead and get started with roll call and certification of a quorum.
Okay.
Janice, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we lost you.
No.
I'm the host now. Look out. Janice is going to try and reconnect.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I had to leave and come back. Something about the live stream threw off my audio, but we are good to go now.
Awesome. If we could do a roll call
All
for
right.
certified quorum, thanks.
Town of Ashland, Miss Amos. Mr. Tucker. Charles City County, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell. He is with us. Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Smith.
Here.
Ms. Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunez.
Here.
Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Mr. Yor.
Here.
Ms. Smidler.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Stauder. Ms. Leduc.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine.
Here.
City of Richmond, Chair Clark.
Here.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Mr. Wagner.
Here.
1 second. Sorry. VDOT, Mr. Riblet. Ms. McAdory. Virginia Port Authority, Ms. Nelson.
Here.
GRTC, Ms. Torres.
She's an attendee and needs to be moved over.
Okay, I'll take care of that. Ms. Sink. RMTA, Ms. Dean. And Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Move to item 4, approval of our November 14th CVTA TAC meeting minutes. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Barb.
Is there a second?
Second, Todd.
Thank you. For all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
This is Kelly from New Kent. I should probably abstain. I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, ayes have it. Move to item 5, public comment period. Chat.
Would you like me to read the statement?
Yes.
Okay. This meeting is being held via Zoom. A link to the webinar where individuals may register to participate is posted at the top of this agenda. Members of the public are invited to submit public comments either verbally or in writing. Written comments can be submitted through the Q&A and chat functions on Zoom or to the email address at the top of this agenda. Written comments will be read aloud or summarized during the meeting when possible and will be included in the meeting minutes. Verbal comments can be taken during this period. Please indicate through the Q&A and chat functions in Zoom if you would like to comment. When acknowledged by the chair, please clearly state your name so that it may be recorded in the meeting minutes. And in terms of attendees, we have 2, but they're both jurisdictional staff.
Okay. Well, thank you. If there's no others here with the public, we'll move to item 6, TAC Chair's report. For this one, just, I don't know if anyone is not aware, but the full body authority did approve the allocation plan. I don't know if that's the name of it or not, but I think that's what's been approved, which included the Fall Line Trail, our CVTA regional projects, as well as I-64 widening. So just thank you all so much for your hard work on getting that done. And I think that was a really good accomplishment for us. Remaining are the parking lot items, which we are going to talk about today. And this I'll go right into item 7, which was just talking about the regional allocations. We are working, just to be clear, I think, is it Chesterfield, Richmond, and Henrico are working on SPA agreement for the utilization of those dollars. And then I guess, Chet, is it this agreement that we got with our original packets? Are those the agreements? Well, no, the original one that VDOT has, they'll be using that format for the other localities that they'll be administering. Which should those localities expect along those lines? What do we think the flow will be? And if we can't answer it, I guess we want to put it on our radar to just so that the other localities can be aware of how projects will be moving forward. I know we have Ms. Nelson on here and having the port project. So we really want to be, up on what's happening and not just have an approved plan and then, somebody's not getting any work done because we haven't really addressed it. Barb has her hand up.
So I guess the agreement that is being reviewed by the attorneys, Chesterfield, Richmond, and Henrico right now is the CVTA locality agreement. So if a locality is administering a project with regional funds, that's what that agreement's for.
Mm-hmm.
We already have the VDOT CVTA regional agreement. So if a locality wants VDOT to administer a project, we've got that one.
Awesome.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, once Henrico, Richmond, Chesterfield reviews this locality regional agreement, we'll send it out to the other localities to be sure they're okay with it before the CVTA full body takes action on it. Right. We wanted that agreement to work for everybody.
Yeah. And so, that agreement will go before the authority to be approved. And so I guess a quick question for you, Ms. Nelson, are you looking for VDOT to administer or is the port administering your project?
It will, we have reviewed and discussed it with VDOT. It will be a VDOT administered project.
Okay, awesome. And so I guess with our beginning process, Barb, maybe just for clarification, so the VDOT SPA agreement with the other localities, those are already in place, or do they need to be got in place?
We already have a VDOT CVTA agreement in place for regional funding. So if the port has a project with regional money on it that they want VDOT to administer, we have an agreement in place already.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna put the CVTA locality agreement and then VDOT regional agreements.
And if I can just clarify for the port and our negotiation or discussions with VDOT, there is another step that we will be coordinating with Hanover County on to make sure, because since they were the applicant, so it's like a little two-step in there, but I'll be coordinating with Joe.
I understand. Yeah, and that would, yeah, so that probably go with the CVTAs, probably be good to review by the CVTA attorney as well. Joe?
Yes, so talking about the agreements, the SPA agreements for locality administered projects, you mentioned that Chesterfield, Henrico, and the city are looking at reviewing that particular agreement. Just clarify, that's not going to be a separate agreement customized for each locality. It's going to be a standard agreement that those three plus any other localities would utilize.
That's correct.
Okay.
Are you saying as if Hanover in the future wanted to self-administer or just?
We do want to self-administer, and then I was a little bit concerned because we haven't been a party to any of the reviews, but we have at least one project that's pending this agreement. And if we need to be looking at it, then we should. But if it's a standard agreement, I think we're comfortable with the three localities that are currently reviewing it. And then you said it's going to be then distributed to the other localities. We're fine with that process, but we don't want to be sitting here not doing something that could be holding up a project. It doesn't sound like that's the case. So that's good.
All right, thank you. Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to, I guess, further elaborate on Joe's question, or the answer to Joe's question, yeah, the goal is to make it a comprehensive agreement for pretty much all situations that the locality would be for projects. The locality will administer the project, whether the facilities that are built are going to be maintained by the locality or VDOT. There'll probably be an addendum to cover that. And it's fairly early in the process, so I think it's probably appropriate to make sure it gets routed to all of the interested localities and have their attorneys to review once it's long and draft. It also has to go to VDOT for review. So Barb, feel free to chime in if I'm misstating anything. But yeah, we're trying to make it one agreement fits all situations, knowing that there's differences. So for example, the city maintains their own roads. We maintain most of our own roads. So we'll be building facilities in Henrico, for example, some of which will be maintained by VDOT, some by the county. So we need it to cover both situations. So that would cover Hanover at the same time it covers the city.
And so what we could do, I think I'm kind of hearing slightly two things, but I think what we could do with our attorneys reviewing, we're kind of going to get kind of a good streamlined version in front of TAC. And then that way, because a little bit, Joe said he's comfortable if our folks are reviewing it now. And then Todd, I'm hearing you a little bit like everybody should be reviewing it. So I think we want to get consensus on that. But an option is that we continue with the big three reviewing it, really, anyone who wants to participate, but we bring that before the TAC, before we, to get its approval on a document before it moves to the next level.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I didn't say it very well, but that's what I meant. Let us get a draft version together from the big three And then maybe send it out concurrently to Hanover and other localities that may be administering their own projects. At the same time, we have it to VDOT for review so that we can overlap. Because at that point, I don't know that there'll be a lot of additional changes, hopefully.
All right, good. Is everybody in agreement with that? Everybody okay with that? I don't need any voting now. I don't want anybody saying we didn't let you do it. Okay, so that's kind of like one of our right now next steps with the CVTA regional allocations. I guess, do we have any, Chet, that you can think of? Any other next steps regarding the regional allocation plan?
Oh, I mean, I think the thing that TAC needs to keep on your radar now, between now and smart scale decisions and the next round of regional applications is the concept of taking on debt to finance additional projects. That's something that the authority has discussed at least twice now, and the finance committee has discussed. And with the regional allocations plan that's included in the packet, you see that goes out from 21 to 28. So there's going to be, in the out years now, there's going to be limited funds available. So I think that's something that we just need to keep up front, knowing that if there is going to be a need for larger projects, larger regional projects that might be in the application cycle, then it's going to take a few months to get the wheels in motion on the finance team side to make sure everything is available when we need it. So that's just, I think, some scheduling and some discussion that should take place on all the committees.
I agree. And I think that kind of feeds into because I guess one of my questions is, so I guess with the smart scale, once they rank them, the CTB kind of determines what they want to fund. And I guess we have it in our framework, again, when something scores low, but say a locality still wants it. Like what, anyway, I was just thinking about that. As we think about the bonding request. So somebody had one that was low, and if they were to bond and get like 10 million or 20 million on it, it would get them the project, or 10 million it would get them the project done. Are we taking those types of things in consideration? While I do know some of our authority members have talked about if something scores low, what is taking leveraging too far in a sense. And then as well as what localities will kind of be proposing in 23. So I think that those are kind of all the things we have to be looking at when thinking about from our levels of what bonding means. Because ultimately, we are only going to do what the authority says, but our projects that we do know are kind of going to be fed into that conversation. Barb? Oh, never mind. I mean, what I say making sense. I'm just saying, as far as Chet just saying we need to think about it, I'm just saying some of the elements that go into us thinking about it would be those things. And that kind of takes us into our next item, the project selection framework, and talking about kind of those low scoring smart scale and things like that. So if there's no other questions or comments, okay, Barb, she remembered.
Well, yeah, I guess I thought I knew, but then I got confused. So yeah, I know one of our parking lot items is leveraging, because right now in the framework document, it says you can request leveraging dollars and you can go after smart scale for 2 rounds before those dollars would go back to the pot. Chess and I were talking today and thought that maybe what we might want to do is, once smart scale results come out, we could put together a report of the CVTA leveraged projects and how they did and whether adding more money would have helped their ranking or whether it wouldn't really this round, and then maybe make a recommendation to the full authority that says maybe this project we should give up the leveraging, or maybe this project, if we added $5 million more, it would do better. The only thing is every round of smart scale is different. So all we can do is talk about how things might have shaken out with this round. So it's a little, and another thing we could do with that report is get some historic data and show how projects that have been submitted in multiple rounds of smart scale, what the ranking has looked like. You know, I think one year 64 looked kind of bad. And then the next round, it looked really bad, you know, and I know we've submitted projects over and over again, and you know, the ranking just changes all the time. So maybe it would include a little education piece or some data that shows how the rankings really fluctuate. So anyway, that was just the beginning of an idea, and that's certainly something we need to talk about, but maybe not the top priority for today's meeting.
Yeah, and I think, of course, some of the fluctuation comes in what other applications were put in. And so, you know, if someone has been, you know, saving up and or everyone has gotten, you know, very good with at least getting 2 or 3 of their scored, and that one really didn't change, then it just probably just trickled on down further down the list because of, I don't know, scoring. But it would be good to see. Austin?
Yeah, one thing on that, I like the idea. The tricky thing is, like our project on 64 and Ashland Road, is we abandoned the full build out of our DDI and kind of went to an intermediate solution because it did score so poorly. But then we had this big economic development project that came out of nowhere in the middle. So it's so hard to anticipate anything. And like you said, smart scale is so different from year to year. I like the thought, but yeah, I think it'll be a challenge nonetheless to kind of figure out what do we do with those projects.
Yep, all very good points. All right, so we're going to just transition our way into item 8. And from there, Mrs. Walker, I will hand it over.
Oh, man. Okay, great. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Diana. Welcome TAC to Highway CVTA Regional Eligibility. And where we left, this is what we're going to focus on today. I mean, we do have some other parking lot items, but today we're going to focus on eligibility for the highway group. And before we jump in, and I know it's going to be redundant, but I do want to share my screen, share. And Barbie, you're going to help me with some of the talking points on this if I miss any, but again, want to set the stage before we jump into our special considerations category for the highway projects. As we go to set the stage or reduce some of the eligibility requirements or make revisions, I just want to remind everyone again, CVTA Regional. I went back to, you remember all those meetings we had, I went back to one of my old slides, and we started off talking about how we have all these documented needs. The prior round of smart scale, we had over $700 million in projects that was not funded. Our long range plan is in the billions of dollars. And at the time, this is how much we were anticipating over 6 years of coming into the authority's pot of money. We are tasked with allocating or coming up with the process for the 35%. So we have a lot of projects to fund, and I just want to echo that, you know, we're out the gate with the first round. We have not ticked off very many of our large projects as yet. So we still have a lot of work to do. So just setting the stage again that a lot of needs, a little bit of money, And then we have the hard part of defining where that line is for regional. And I put it out there, more regional versus less regional. I'm not saying anything is not regional. It's just we're trying to distinguish and set that line. So
The top tier of regional. Yeah.
we have it's all great in theory, right? And then we have the hard work of actually defining it, which is not easy. So, okay. So
Can I add something about this slide before we move on?
sure.
I do think the CVTA was really formed when Mr. Brown saw how successful Nova and Hampton Roads were in using authority money to leverage in smart scale and get some big projects funded. And we were complaining about not being able to get big projects funded in Richmond. And he kept pushing us towards an authority. So we did that and, set it up with the 35% for regional, but also kind of recognized that there were going to be local needs and, not everybody was going to want to fund or, no one was necessarily wanting to give up some of their projects that were more local. So we do have the 50% for local. That 50%, I think, opens it up for locals to be able to go after revenue sharing when before maybe they didn't have match for revenue sharing or TAP or, to leverage in CMAQ and RSDP. So, anyway, it just gets back to we've got a lot of large regional projects that we haven't put a dent in.
Right. Okay. So highway eligibility, 2 seconds. We started off with arterials with a 30 vehicles per day volume threshold. We reduced that down to 20,000 vehicles a day. This is what our eligibility would look like. Then we added in corridors of statewide significance and it expanded some. And then we added in arterial preservation network. So this is our eligibility for the highway group today. And we left off last meeting. We wanted to consider what we are calling a special considerations criteria for projects that do not meet the current framework eligibility of arterial with 20,000 vehicles a day. So we're going to go through some of these special consideration criteria. But before we do that, we asked everyone to submit some test projects that we could, vet these different ideas. So what we ended up with, this is the list, and I can circulate this for everyone who wants to dig in after the meeting. I'll send the spreadsheet around along with the mapping that we had pulled together. But we ended up with 14 projects that in my screen, I'm gonna have to make it a little bit smaller, see if I can get a little more in on the screen here. Okay, so these were our 14 test projects that folks submitted. These are not eligible under the current framework, mostly because of volume. Most of these meet the arterial requirement. They just don't meet the volume requirement. I highlighted here new alignments because we'd have to have a projected ADT for those. I pulled some of the existing ADTs. So assuming these wouldn't reach the 20,000, they would not be eligible. So we're just using those as well for a test case. So these are our 14 projects. And I think what I want to do is walk everyone through and have some discussion by category. And then we can look at how that category applies to the test project. So I'm going to start off. We had some discussion about, and we're just going to go column by column. Should we consider projects that are on a US route? So Chet and his team, Chet Miles Sulab, helped us by pulling together some information in map format, which is hopefully easy for everyone to digest quickly. So in black are the current eligible roadways, arterials with 20,000 a day, COSSs, and APN, Arterial Preservation Network. These roads are eligible. Here are the test projects mapped. So you can see in pink, here are our 14 test projects that were submitted. We didn't have any in, I don't think Powhatan, New Kent, or Charles City. But you can see the pink are our test projects. Okay, so we had talked about, should we allow projects that are on US routes? So if we click on US routes, blue, I don't know if everyone can see that, the difference. I'm going to zoom out, might be a little more clear. So if we add US route designations, you will see that the black, which is our current eligible roadways, we pick up 522 Goochland and Powhatan. We don't pick up anything out east, Hanover. I think this is Route 33 through Henrico and Hanover. Let's see. And then you've got this blue through the city here, but mostly the eligible US routes are already accounted for in our existing eligibility. So if our goal is to relax some of our requirements so that the rural communities have more eligible roadways, you pick up some, but you don't pick up that much. What that looks like for our test projects for US, and I'm going to hide this so we can fit this on our screen. Okay. So for roadways that are test projects that are on a US route, we pick up 3 that would be then eligible. So 3 out of the 14 would be on a US route. So I just put some notes in here, and I'm going to populate this as we have discussion. So I think in summary, most of the current eligibility requires already cover most of the US routes, and that you don't really pick up many eligible roadways for the rural localities. Any discussions on this? And I can keep going. Oh, there we go. Joe's got a comment.
You're on such a good flow. I hate to.
No, you're good. I can pick it back up.
So I do see you have 33 listed as a test project, but I didn't see it on the list.
Oh, sure. Let me make sure I have it. 33 from Henrico County line to Ashland Road. So
that's a different, that would be, a portion of that would be in Henrico, a portion would be in Hanover, but it's not, just to clarify, it's not the entire, it's Ashland Road is back up.
I think we actually have it mapped correctly, but I have it in the table, just the portion from here to here is Henrico's portion, I think, right?
That's Hanover's portion.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's Hanover's. You can kind of see that dash.
Yeah, the dash. Yeah.
So where you see Farrington, I believe, is where it stops.
Wait. Farrington here.
I believe that's Ashland Road that comes across.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
Yeah, I think we mapped the whole length of it through Hanover County, but it's supposed to stop here at Ashland Road. Yeah. Right?
Yes. It's
Okay.
Just for test purposes. Okay.
Yeah. So this portion should not be included. We'll correct that.
That would have been a long.
It's basically from here to here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep. We'll clean up the mapping. Okay. So I will keep going. We can always circle back. So this is, again, blue is US routes, pink are test projects. So now we talked about, what about projects that are on just a state primary highway, all the primaries through the region? What would that look like? So if I turn on primaries, let me zoom out a little bit. Primaries are now in red. I'm going to turn off US routes. So black is eligible to date. Red are primaries. And so what you see with this is obviously you pick up New Kent now has 4 primaries that are now added. New Kent picks up some, you have a little more eligible facilities in the rules. The challenge is that many of these are low volume primaries. So, you know,
HS are the test projects primaries.
are the test projects primaries? Yeah, so test projects.
So if you turned off the pink, it would be red underneath.
Test projects off.
Yeah.
Some of them. So I'll show you in summary here. So some of these are not on primaries. So half of them are on primaries, half of them are not. And the challenge is if I was to click on just some of these just randomly, 3,800 vehicles a day, 2,700 vehicles a day, you know, a lot of these just don't have much volume on them. And, you know, again, if our criteria is 20,000, a lot of these are not even half of that. 2,300. I think when I was just looking around, well, that one would be eligible. But hold on, like this one has 9,300 a day, 33. Again, our threshold currently is 20. This section, 3,900. So I think I captured in the notes for state for primaries. It's good for the rural localities and now have some eligible roadways. A lot of them are low volume. We could allow this criteria in combination with something else. So one thing I wanted for you guys to think about is, do we make, so if a project is ineligible with arterial plus 20,000 a day, should we require whatever of these criteria we think is valid, should we have everyone make a case and meet more than one of these criteria? So it wouldn't be enough to say, for example, if you're on a primary, then you're eligible. Like it should be, the question is, should it be primary plus something else if we think that's primary is a reasonable consideration? And then I'll go one more and then we can kind of talk about these 5 together. So the next thing we considered was, what about proximity to an eligible roadway? So if a project isn't on one of these eligible roadways, but it's in close proximity to. So Chet and his folks gave us a mapped the eligible roadways and then a 1 mile buffer off of those, a 2 mile buffer and a 3 mile buffer. So what that looks like, I'm going to turn off US routes and primary. So again, we've got black is our current eligible roadways, test projects in pink. If I do the buffers off of an eligible roadway. So here's what 1 mile, if a project is within 1 mile of one of these eligible roadways, you can see that you pick up 54 at 95, you pick up Ashland Road, but you don't pick up Ponce Track and Ashland Road. You don't pick up Woolridge, but you pick up Center Point. Everything within here, you would pick up, this is, I think, Route 5. All the city stuff, you'd pick up Meadowbridge. So you would pick up 9 out of the 14 projects are within a 1 mile buffer of an eligible roadway. And then from there, it just pretty much covers the whole region. If we were to add 2 miles, you pick up the intersection project at 522 in Goochland. with the 2-mile buffer. You still don't quite get out to Ponce Track and Ashland. But you see what happens is, and it just gets even more coverage with 3 miles. You basically say everything in the region is eligible. So I kind of summed that one up as 1 mile buffer, 2 mile, and 3 mile. Doesn't really add eligible roadways for the rules, and it makes the larger localities even have more eligible roadways. So if the intent is to have coverage out in the rural areas, the buffers, I mean, they do kind of, you pick up some, but you don't pick up a ton. So I don't know what the group thinks about that. But so that's the different roadway types we considered: US routes, primaries, and then buffers within proximity, certain proximity to an eligible roadway. So open it up to folks, and what you can see here, 3 out of 14 just considering US routes, half of the projects on primaries, and then it just goes up from there if you add buffers. But it's mostly benefiting the more urban, suburban folks. Okay. Barb.
When you were talking about the state primaries and needing additional criteria, I think particularly if we were to use this as a special consideration, we would need additional criteria, since primary route, the designation of a primary route really doesn't have much to do with volume or functional classification. We've got secondary routes that have way more volume and serve more critical needs in our county than some primary routes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of random, I don't know. I guess it's more for the funding rather than
How it functions.
Yes. So I do think we would need another criteria.
Okay. Daron, I didn't want to steal your.
No, it's okay. I when you kept going, when you did, I was like, well, she's in charge. Austin has his hand up too. Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tend to agree with what Barb was saying somewhat, that, I mean, for Goochland County specific, yeah, primaries all the way out to the county line on Route 6, but is George's Tavern, where you see 45 and Route 6 coming together, is that really a regional project? If I were to want intersection improvements there, no, it's not. Would it be eligible if we include the red lines? Yeah. I do think, to answer one of your questions earlier, if we end up with, like, say it's 5 total criteria, I do think it would make sense to have, it must meet 2 or 3 of the 5 criteria rather than just 1, because there could be a lot of one-off developments that might be, or one-off projects that would get funding, but they don't necessarily serve a need. I do think it's important to include, it looked like you were going to get to it, so I don't want to steal any thunder, but the proximity to counties. To me, I think that's more important than a buffer from eligible roads. Specifically, our biggest thing, and my whole point with driving this conversation up to date, is the Ashland Road and Pouncey Tract intersection.
Mm-hmm.
For Goochland County, that intersection is pretty much going to start stopping economic development along Ashland Road between the county line and I-64. That intersection, to me, is the whole reason why I've been kind of pushing some of this conversation that we need to expand the eligibility, because we have no way to get that funded. And I know it sits in Hanover County. I want to work with y'all on that every way, shape, and form possible, but it may soon preclude us from doing what we want to do as a county. So to me, I think that criteria is a whole lot more important than distance to a eligible road.
Others? Thank you. We can keep going. I think this will kind of get to some of what Austin was saying. Maybe there's something in here that will help with that intersection criteria. Let's see. So we had talked about adjacent or some proximity to an activity center. And when we left off, we said we would review activity centers were identified as part of the long range transportation plan. And what that looks like is, so I'm going to zoom out. Oops, there we go. I'm going to turn off buffers, turn off US routes primaries. Okay, test projects, eligibility. So if I turn on activity centers, okay. You can kind of see activity centers are kind of core, kind of in this core area and up and down 95. But
How
again,
did you define that?
say again.
How did you define that activity center?
Good question. Miles, do you know kind of I'd have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head.
Sure. So this was density of jobs and population, and it was a TAZ basis. So Sulab could provide more detail, and we can get that for you. But it's in our socioeconomic data from the LRTP. It explains the thresholds that we used.
Okay.
So there's some thresholds. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Jobs, population. So again, if our intent is to open up eligibility a little more, even if we were to add a buffer to these, we still wouldn't pick up. I mean, you would pick up this guy if you said, half a mile or something, mile, you would pick up some of these outer ones. Well, that's close to one down here. So that's an option, but I don't know if, go ahead, Barb.
I think it would be like those other buffers where it's going to just mean a lot more eligible for that core.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
getting really
Out.
away into the rural areas as much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, Chester, let's look at the next one.
All right.
That one doesn't do much for him.
Okay. Economic development. So this one, we had a conversation with Sulab, who puts together the regional travel demand model. And we were trying to figure out, is there a job threshold? Something to do with jobs. If you can show that your project supports an economic development project, or that's going to generate some level of employment and benefit the region. And then we were trying to figure out what would be a threshold we could consider. And in talking to Sulab, best practices that he uses when developing a regional travel demand model, origin and destinations within a region to estimate demand. He was saying that if there was a site that generated over 1,000 jobs, that would have enough of a regional impact that they go in and they update the zones in the model because of the impact that those jobs would have on travel. So we could start off by considering 1,000 job threshold for an EDA project. So, and then we were trying to brainstorm, the user coming to Goochland that we all don't know who it is, but we know who it is. How many jobs would that bring in? We were trying to think of stuff that's out in New Kent. What are some of the projects that are coming? What would be a good threshold? So we wanted to throw out to the group, does 1,000 seem reasonable as a threshold for a EDA project?
Hi, Joseph. It's Nora. Can I speak to that just a little bit?
Absolutely.
And I apologize. I came in late. I got here when you started talking about the 1 mile buffers.
Okay.
I look forward to looking at the rest of your presentation after the meeting. But as far as economic development, I know for our projects, it's really hard to determine. We have 2 speculative projects right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hanover has a speculative project right now that's 1 million square feet, but that potentially it's 1 million square feet, a ton of trucks, a ton of trucks. but it may only have 400 employees.
Right.
And they can't tell you how many employees it's going to have now. So there might need to be a square footage component as well. Back to ours, we have 2 speculative projects that could go well over 1 million square feet when combined. So the 1,000, I think, just might be hard. And by the time, for Goochland, for example, by the time you make that announcement that there's going to be 1,000 jobs, you're way behind on getting the necessary transportation improvements you need to support that project.
Okay.
That's all.
No, that's good. So
And we-
square footage component, or square footage threshold, job threshold.
Trucks.
Um,
And in this, when we were talking, we also did talk about making a case with zoning, site plans, land use plans, traffic impact analysis. I'm wondering if that could capture that planned stuff, just like Nora was saying, once you have somebody on the hook, you're trying to play catch up with the project. But if you're able to say, in my comp plan, we've got this industrial area planned and we're going to be generating this much traffic or creating this many jobs or square footage or something.
and you combine that with it's on a primary or a
Yes. Yeah.
maybe not the buffer, but yeah. Thoughts on economic development?
This is Nora again. Sorry if I could add on to what Barb said. I think that's a great idea to explore further those things, because I know for us on a couple of our speculative sites, even if they don't have a user, if they're going to any kind of plan of development or rezoning or anything like that, they have to do a TIA based off of, and they just use the ITE travel information. If they're proposing a warehouse or an office building, they just use the travel information, trip information that's provided through the manual.
Okay.
Hey, Jessa, this is Todd.
Hey, Todd, go for it.
So, yeah, to the point I think that we're getting at, and I think we talked about this before with the chicken and the egg, and that you don't want to have something not qualify until, facility not qualify until there's already site development, and then you're playing catch up. What about consideration of the UDA as defined in VTrans, which is, I think, maybe not by itself a good measure, but in combination maybe would be a good measure.
Yeah, we did kick that one around, didn't we, Barb? I think we did. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
I was feeling like UDAs could be kind of local. UDA is pretty broad.
UDA is, I agree, UDA is broad, but it is showing intent by a locality through adoption of the UDA designation as an economic development focus. So
True.
again, as a standalone, absolutely not, but I think in combination, I think it gives us a tool to look beyond of what's already an approved site plan. For
Okay.
me.
Yeah. Okay. We can look into that one too.
Thinking about Powhatan, I know they've got
I know I was
some-
trying to.
I think that would be good for them. I don't know about New Kent, Charles City.
Yeah, I don't know what everybody's regional UDA map looks like.
I can look for that, Chessa, while you're doing.
Yeah,
other stuff.
I brought it up here, but I need to find the live link. Yeah, if you wanna. If
We
you
don't
wanna
have.
fu-
and-
I know
No.
they've got
I know I
some.
was trying to.
I think that would be good for them. I don't know about New Kent.
Okay. Austin?
Yeah,
Okay.
I like the idea of the UDAs. And with TIA, going back to that for a second, for context, so the Project Rocky, which drove some conversations about Ashland Road, I think
Mhm.
Ashland Road, according to your spreadsheet, has 8,000 or so, 9,000 or so vehicles, ADT now. Yeah, open that real quick. I don't recall the last VDOT counts, so 7,000, okay. So I wonder if with the TIA, and we're certainly not going to come to an answer on that today, but the
Right.
Project Rocky weekday daily trips are going to more than double the current traffic on Ashland Road, according to the VDOT count. So I think if there's a ratio of, and have this be one of the boxes, that if the EDA, the economic development, is going to increase traffic by X%, or if it's a doubling of traffic, maybe 50%, maybe there's a ratio out there that the TIA has to hit.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if we should try to, do we have any, well, we have that test projects that you have the TIA for that one. Wonder if there's any of these that have traffic studies that I could pull from TripGen stuff, information.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to jot it down, but yeah, Rocky's got, it's 6,700 total trips, and Ashland Road's 7,000 today. So that in and of itself, I mean, that puts us, it's that much closer to the 20,000 already. But I think doubling of traffic on a moderately busy road is, I think, something important to take into consideration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, that's a good suggestion. All right, so we've got square footage considerations, truck traffic generation, UDA. We'll have to see who has some, what that looks like for the region. TIAs and some sort of threshold tied to the amount of traffic being generated relative to existing. Okay. And, maybe it's, the applicant has to create a narrative, which whatever criteria we come up with, they've got to try to make the case, sell it. Here are all the ways that this helps the region. And maybe it's all of these things. I don't know. Well, we'll keep pushing. Okay, a couple more. I think some of these should just drop out, just my personal vote. This one, so these two, proximity to an adjacent jurisdiction, commuter route. So I think these were we were trying to get at, I think some of the conversation before was if a route is interjurisdictional, if it's serving commuter routes that are coming into the urbanized area, going through multiple, jurisdictions. And we had talked about, should we require concurrence between all the different adjacent localities? So Pontchartrain and Ashland Road, you have Hanover, Henrico, and Goochland. So does everybody need to be on board? And that gets a little hairy. Well, let me pause that there. The other one was commuter route. We were saying if a route serves commuter traffic, so it's picking up traffic from outside the Metroplex and bringing in, that it was of importance because it's commuting folks to jobs, for example. So I kind of think that functionality is kind of captured in some of these other ones, and that this would be hard to define a commuter route. So maybe some of these other ones get at that point a little bit better. Thoughts on, concurrence, regional concurrence from partners on a project as a criteria, or commuter route, how to define a commuter route. Do we all agree that we're kind of getting at it with some of these other measures? Thoughts, or are there any other ideas for?
I tend to agree with your commuter route thought, is that I think the intent there is good, but I think there are other ways to cover it with some of the more detailed criteria. I'll go back to the proximity to adjacent jurisdictions. That I think that's more of a point project criteria, like an intersection, rather than a linear project. And the Ashland Road Pouncey Tract is within, I think, a half mile of 3 different counties. I mean, to me, and I will be very focused on that intersection, because that's the intersection Goochland County needs to get fixed. We've got another on top of Project Rocky. We've got 350,000 square feet closer to that intersection about to hit the rezoning process. So I think there needs to be a way, and we can talk about concurrence, but I think that should be a checkbox if an intersection project is within X many miles, whether it's a half mile or whatever that number would be. I think it would be eligible as a regional project, and then concurrence would have to be, I think that would have to be made between, I think in my opinion, it would be between the county that the project sits in. And if that's not the county pushing for the project, then the county that would be pursuing the application, or at least being the point man on it, would have, if it's 2, then both of those would have to be providing resolutions of support for the application, et cetera.
All right, Jeff, I'll just take over really quickly. Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, regarding the concurrence, there is some very convoluted language in the legislation that established the CVTA that was borrowed from the other 2 transportation authorities in the state, that, and I don't have it memorized, if anybody else does, but it basically prevents anything getting approved without the concurrence of, I guess, the impacted jurisdiction. So there is some concurrence language in the enabling legislation. So I think this would be consistent with that.
Okay, we'll try to check on that. Yeah, I have some comments on that. Barb, and then Joe.
To me, proximity to adjacent jurisdiction doesn't necessarily mean regional. You know, if I think about, we've got a roundabout project at Lakeview Branders Bridge in Chesterfield County, way south. It's really close to Colonial Heights. But it's still a low volume, kind of local road. It's not regional just because it's there. To me, regional, you dissolve boundaries. So it's still, anyway, I just feel like functional class and volume dictates it more.
Joe?
I think I'm most intrigued by maybe some combination of primary routes and somehow figuring out commuter routes. I think we got to where we are today at looking at all of this because we were trying to figure out a way to bring rural localities into the mix. And when you plotted the primaries, immediately what jumped out to me was Charles City and New Kent. Right. So, which were 2 of the counties that seemed to be the most, I don't know what the right word is, lacking of opportunities. And I don't know the patterns in either of those 2 counties, but it would seem to me that, I guess Route 6 is the one through Charles City is got to be a main corridor. so then I got to thinking, at the risk of making this too complex, but back to Barb's point, she talked about how Chesterfield has, for example, some secondaries with lower classifications that carry higher volumes and function at a higher level than some primaries, and we probably do too. So just thinking, just right off the top of my head, how about a ratio? If I take 54, for example, through Hanover, which is a primary, Hanover's population is roughly 100,000, and the lowest segments of 54 carry about 5,000. We said 5%. What is 5% ADT as a ratio of overall population on a primary? I know this starts to sound like smart scale, but I wonder if there's some ratio, because it is a bit relative. I don't think we're ever going to get to where we want to in trying to draw in rurals unless we do something along those lines, because like we said, it's Pandora's box. As soon as you start lowering the threshold, then it draws in more and more from the big three. So I'm just pitching that out there as something to look at. It's like a ratio of ADT to overall population on primary routes, and I picked 5%, but that's just a number. It could be 3% or 10% or something, but something to look at.
Okay.
Hey, Chessa,
Yeah.
building on what Joe just said, what if there were like circles, 20,000 here, 15 here, 10 here? You know what I mean? 20,000 would be the ADT threshold for the core of the region.
Oh, as you move out, there's a ring of reduced ADT threshold. I see. So, that's interesting. So kind of like within some core, it's 20. And as you get some distance outside that boundary, it's reduced. But so then what I could do is I'd have to pull, which I think I already have it from the last exercise, ADT volumes on these primaries to see if there's because a lot of just me moving around with my cursors, they're not even 5,000 a day. So I'd have to go from 20 to, what is the threshold, but I could come up with some ideas to present.
Yeah, but it might make it easier for them to say,
yeah,
I've got a comp plan that's showing I can get it to 10. Like it would be really hard to take a 1,500 vehicle per day road and say, I'm going to get it to 20. But I know I can get it to 10 in 20 years. It might make it easier to show projected growth.
I don't, this is Rhonda from Charles City.
Hey, Rhonda.
Hi, I would like to see the two projects, Miles, that we did submit that weren't, so we submitted 3 and two Wilcox Neck and 106 didn't score well. I mean, for funding. So I'd like to see how that scenario would have impacted those projects. Sure. Because without that, it's hard for me to say.
Yeah. Sure.
Would it have improved an outcome or would it not improve an outcome? I don't know. I'm encouraged that as a committee, the committee is open to considering alternatives to improve the outcomes of your, of the rural community participants.
Yeah, so send us those test projects, Rhonda. Send those to Chessa.
Okay.
And so, Tessa, is what Barb, just for my own comprehension, what Barb is saying and what Joe is saying are two different things? Okay, and so those would be two additional ways that you would come back and show us next time?
Yeah, so what I heard
Next year.
was, yeah, so we would, two ways of getting at it. We could do the ADT on primaries as a proportion to current population and see if there's some natural breaks that make sense. And then we could look at a different ADT threshold outside of some boundary. And that's an easy exercise because we could pull, I think I've already got it, ADTs on all the primary sections, and then we'll see if there's a threshold, a reduced threshold that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I guess my last question would be, we would then still be considering those two along with some combination of what we've done, all of this stuff we've done down here, or Joe, were you speaking about replacing all of this that we've done with potentially, what you said, or potentially what Barb said? I just want to make sure we're clear on, do we want anything, is what Joe said a solution to us utilizing any of this information, these special considerations listed here? Or would we still use some of those considerations along with what Joe has said? Yes, and in combination. So I just wanted to make sure that as we continue to add scenarios, maybe we can, I think we maybe all agreed that the mile buffers aren't adequate for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. Let's go through these real quick and see what's still on the table and what's eliminated. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
So US routes, I think we could keep them on the table. They're just not that impactful.
Isn't that pretty much covered by the state primaries? Aren't they one and the same for the most part?
So the difference, let's see.
You could kind of use that to make a case.
Or?
Like you could say, I've got this primary, and then in addition to it being a primary, it's a US route.
Yeah, I think for now we probably keep those two.
Okay.
We'll look at it again.
Buffers didn't do much for the rules. So
yeah, I would say no.
I think this one was out unless someone wants to.
Yeah, everybody speak up.
Okay. Activity centers.
I didn't see that do much either for the rurals. Rurals, your opinions?
Here are the activity centers.
We're leaning towards no, chopping it.
Yeah, I think.
So when you say that it's not doing much, I'm just gonna have to take your word for it because I really can't see it if I can't see the change.
Oh, you can't?
Oh, you can't see the screen, Rhonda?
See the blue blobs? Those are activity centers.
No. I mean, it's because I'm at home and I'm just looking at a laptop, so it's like super small. So I'm taking your word for it that it's not impactful. It's not significantly changing the floor outcome. So
there are no activity centers in New Kent.
Yeah, you don't
Charles
get any.
City.
There's none in Charles City. There's none in New Kent. There's only one in South Chesterfield. They're not very.
None in Powhatan.
Yeah, they're around the core.
Yeah. Okay.
So then we're leaning towards taking them out, both alternatives. Is that what you're saying?
Taking out being a project, being adjacent to an activity center as a criteria.
That's the criteria.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will send everyone a link to this map and the spreadsheet as you see it here with my notes. So in case you guys want to dig around further. I'll email the group after this call.
And the other criteria?
So we're keeping
The other one
in,
you were talking about taking out.
oh, buffers. We are eliminating having a 1 mile buffer around eligible. So we have roads that are currently eligible per the criteria today. And then we were saying, let's include projects within a 1 mile buffer of those roads to expand the eligibility. We looked at a 1 mile buffer, a 2 mile buffer, and a 3 mile buffer. And it doesn't, you pick up additional eligible roadways within those buffers. It does expand eligibility, but it doesn't expand it very much in the rural parts of the region.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
And you'll see it when you get the link to the map. You can look at it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So economic development, we have more work to do there. We got some good ideas that I'm going to see if I can flesh out a couple of these by our next meeting. What we talked about, generation of jobs is maybe not the best. Square footage, truck traffic, UDAs. And then obviously if you have some sort of zoning, long range plan, site plans, TIAs that show trip generation of a certain, and then coming up with some threshold of trip generation that would make sense. So if you're doubling, if your trips are going to double, for example, the existing ADT, that might be a case to consider. So more on economic development, that's still in. Let's see, and then a couple more and we will be wrapped up. Let's see, proximity to another jurisdiction and getting concurrence from those jurisdictions. I think that's kind of baked into the process anyway, but I think this was a no. This doesn't carry forward. A project that just happens to be close to more than one jurisdiction. Does that mean it's regional?
I
Are
think
we
it
not-
does. And this is Austin McGuersland. I tend to think it does. Just because I think that you're taking more than one locality through a point. I think it does kind of inherently make it a regional intersection or a regional roadway because you're delivering multiple jurisdictions to and from an area. So I would argue that at least for point projects, not necessarily linear ones, but for intersection, not for commuter routes, but for proximity. Yeah, there we go. I would argue it's important to keep in there.
Yeah, and Gary agrees, and I somewhat agree too, not only for point, but I think it's helpful when other localities, when they are working together to do a project. I mean, I think that's like the main basis to why regional entities were created, was to ensure that other localities know what's going on right next door to them. But it could be helpful as for this process that it is to me a sense of regionalism, especially when you're stretching. But I know we haven't figured out how these criteria will play a part, so it may be again a combination of one or two, and this does allow for some flexibility for projects.
So let's keep it in for now, and then we will vet this some more next meeting because we can talk through some of these test ones as an example. So if there's not concurrence, if you have 3 localities and 1 out of 2 does not agree, should that be a thing where someone, because legislatively there's that language that Todd mentioned we need to review, but we don't want to be able to effectively kill a project either. I don't think if it's so. Let's vet that one some more. We'll keep it on.
Well, yeah, and I think when we say concurrence, it's not, to me, it's a bonus when you get concurrence, but not
Okay.
required.
So that's what we need to, let's, yeah,
I think
okay.
it's a bonus, not requirement.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Todd?
not to continue to beat on this one, but I think we need to consider what we're calling it and what we're trying to capture here.
Right.
More than just proximity to adjacent jurisdiction is really what beneficial to multiple jurisdictions, right? Is what we're really trying to define here.
Yeah, perfect, yeah.
Which kind of goes to a certain degree what we had in that next column for commuter route, which also wasn't very well defined, but it encompasses that as well.
Yeah.
That covers what Austin was describing for the intersection at Pouncey Track, I believe.
Okay, so we are good at, this isn't quite.
Knowing that because the other one encompasses it. Yeah.
Not defined enough. Yeah. These other ones are, okay. And then lastly, real quick, I didn't get to this one, but we currently have the guidelines for new alignments, new roads. We have the criteria that new road needs to have a projected ADT above the 20,000. So we could say for existing roads, that also applies. We didn't write it that way. But that if you could show an existing road will grow to over 20,000 in the next 20 years. Something like that. That could be a criteria for existing roads as well, because we only have it in there for new roads. Supported by TIA, a planning study, something to that effect. Okay, well, we could leave this on the table. What time are we supposed to be? I'm just talking.
Yeah, we're about 7 minutes until 2:30.
Okay. Thoughts on a road, any road, if you can make a case that the road will get to 20,000 in the next 20 years. That's basically what this criteria.
I mean,
I like that one.
Yeah, and I think for that one too, though, that kind of goes into what Barb was saying about the threshold or the core. So maybe before we yes or no that one, we see what that looks like. Yeah, and then can, maybe address it.
Okay, so we'll keep that in and we'll tackle that one next time.
Yeah, I like the core idea as well. And maybe if there is a core, is that still the original criteria, and then outside of it, there's a minimum plus 3 of these or 2 of these
right
out of the 5 we landed on, or whatever that ends up being.
Awesome.
Maybe that's kind of the happy medium there. I think based on, talking about it right now, I think it does make a lot of sense. That is it. Just thinking about it on the map, like 295 and 288, if you're within that, is it the original? Because that's kind of the beltway. Is that the original criteria? And then outside of that is X ADT plus 2 of the 5, or wherever we land.
Yeah. I think that's, good. Okay. So next time, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 different things on criteria on the table. And then when we meet, we can vet those further, as well as kind of the tier of things. What do we want us to have as a minimum? And then do you get bonus if you also have this, or do you need 2 out of 5 or 3 out of, we can keep pushing this forward, and we'll fold in Charles City's, the 3 projects that they have. And we'll keep vetting this. Barb, did you have?
If localities have projects that you forgot about that you want to include in the test case, send them.
Yes, send them.
But send them like in a week.
Yeah.
And Gary was just saying in the chat, you may want to move the other Joe's idea over to the ADT section 2. Those are kind of correlated with. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Good.
I know. Oh Lord,
this was good.
With one parking lot item.
Well, we did figure out next fall we were doing application intake. So maybe next meeting we might want to start giving ourselves some deadlines on working through parking lot. So next meeting we'll pick this back up. we'll run through our outstanding list of parking lot items and we'll talk about schedule so we can start ticking some things off because we need to make sure because when Smart Scale comes out, we're all going to need to be planning and making some decisions about what we're going to be submitting.
So yeah,
Okay.
just I had considering how cost overruns, project estimates, and project management will be managed is something we needed, like a big category.
Cost overruns. Okay.
Yeah, cost overrun, project estimates, and project management. So here I had talking a comprehensive approach that allows the authority to better be prepared for unknowns of a project. We said we would look towards the CMAC and RSTS. I usually say the old name, so I'm just all confused. But the transportation block grant dollars, as far as kind of like a starting point for that. And then we're doing the test, and then regional dollars, smart scale leverage. Oh yeah, so for the smart scale leverage, yeah, we still need to talk about, which Barb mentioned earlier, was the looking at, you know, those that score well, does it need more money, and so forth. So those are our kind of remaining big ticket categories.
Hey, Dorona.
Yes, Barb.
Thinking about the cost estimate increases, I know that Chet and Miles have been thinking about that a lot and studying it and talking about it. Maybe they could.
So do you guys want to present? So we'll do.
Maybe they could lead
January,
that discussion.
I think January we're going to be still getting through this. Maybe at that same meeting, Chet, you all can prepare to maybe present some of what y'all have been thinking about on the cost overrun items for January as well.
Sounds good.
And then we'll go straight after we get those settled, straight into the smart scale leveraging, as that'll be like the next thing knocking on our door. So this is going to be Jan. These are Jan. Got it. All right. Do any of our members have any comments, questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Todd.
Is there gonna be a finance committee meeting on Wednesday?
I saw cancellation, but check. Yeah, it's canceled.
It's canceled.
It has
There was
been
an update sent out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I was happy. Thank you. I was like, Merry Christmas.
Okay, and everybody be on the lookout in your inboxes for the spreadsheet that you saw today and the link to the mapping. If you want to do some digging, come up with ideas.
Sure. Thank you, Chesta, Barb, for all y'all work on this. Thank you so much. So we don't have any other questions or comments. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 9th in the new year. Look forward to, hope each of you have a blessed holiday season, and this meeting is adjourned. Bye.